Hi, I'm R.L. Parker, epic fantasy and dark fantasy author. Last episode I covered a bit about Bathed in the Blood of Ravens, and this episode I will be talking about Siscci. So stay tuned if you want to find out more about a dark fantasy borderline horror novel that I wrote. For those of you who were here last time, you'll remember that I pointed out just how big Bathed in the Blood of Ravens is. It's epic fantasy. Go watch that video if you want to find out more about it. But very large story, large cast, lots going on. What I didn't cover in that is that this took me about 2.5 months of consecutive writing to write, and about 1.5 months to edit between me and my wife and a proofreader and an alpha reader. And then it went through a whole beta read process and the whole 9 yards. It was about 6 months from start to finish to get this out to a publisher. Now, I wrote that during the whole lockdown that we don't talk about because I finally had free time. I'm a software developer by trade and currently a tech lead on a project. I've been tech lead and architect on projects for the past 10, 12 years. I've been a programmer officially, professionally for 30, and I actually started programming in 1986, before probably a lot of you were born. All that to say is my career always took priority. And I always had way too much to do with a day job to try and write a full-fledged story of that size. But that was the book I had to write first. It was just burned into my brain. Came up with the concepts for the world. Came up with the concepts for the world in 1993 and the stories in 1993 through 1995, 96, 97. And they just stewed in the back of my brain. So that was the one that was burning a hole in me, and I had to get out first. Makes sense, right? I also had more time on my hands, so of course tackle a bigger novel. Well, I handled the editing and publishing process on that and marketing it and trying to get it in people's hands all the way until the following year. So I started writing on June 14th, 2020 and finished writing in mid-September, and then with about a 1 month break in the middle there where I wasn't writing at all. I was focused on the publishing side of things, just trying to get my head wrapped around the industry. But I didn't write again, or what I call putting pen to paper, even though I do it on the laptop, until the very next year. So it came to release day on that, and I was talking to the wife. We were out in the side yard. We had a whole bunch of family and friends over, and beta readers that live locally came over and joined in on a big release party, and everybody was asking, including me, what are you going to write next? And I was like, well, I really want to write book 2 of that, but I need something smaller that I can bite off first. And at that time I was so busy that I wasn't able to write Monday through Friday. So I was like, all right, let me think of a shorter story, or how I can phrase a story shorter to accomplish it in a quick a timeline as possible. So I set myself to a challenge. Right? It was the very end of the last weekend of June 2021, and I decided that I was going to write about one of the characters that people loved from that book, from Bathed in the Blood of Ravens. I will not say who she was in that book because she's going by a different name. She has a different appearance, but the other characters around her do eventually figure out who she is. And it's somebody that my wife knew as a non-player character back in our Dungeons and Dragons days. And when she read that reveal scene in Bathed in the Blood of Ravens, I could hear her from across our huge house. I say huge because it's the biggest I've ever lived in. But I could hear her from across the house yelling, "Yes! Yes! I knew it was her!" So, all that to say, it was a really exciting character to write and for my wife to experience. And the feedback I got from beta readers and early readers that were able to reach out to me was they needed to know more about her. And I had always planned on writing a little bit more of her backstory, but not necessarily going back as far as this one did in time, because she's an intriguing character to me. In the meanwhile, I had a dream that was extremely vivid. Right around that time that I was in the middle of the publishing process of Blood of Ravens, I woke up in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. This dream had just gone off in my head, and I had to race and find a notebook. I'm not generally a note taker when it comes to writing. If an idea doesn't solidify itself in my brain and stick there on its own, I don't write it. But in this case, I had to because it was just so vivid. And I'm somewhat of an artist, but not I wouldn't call myself an artist, but I can produce art in a pinch. So I did draw like a little rough sketch of the face that I saw. Well, that became this. This is a painting by an artist named John Kelly Pevahouse. He goes by J.K. Pevahouse. That's P-E-V-A-H-O-U-S-E. You can find him on Instagram. All of his art is gothic horror type stuff. He does a little bit of fantasy art here and there, but he's definitely very Geiger-esque in his artistic motivations. Very dark and cryptic and just awesome art. I'm not a person who usually enjoys art. It's just I see it and I'm like, I can agree, yeah, that's pretty, but it just doesn't speak to me until I see stuff like this. This is like chef's kiss, cream of the crop. So I met him at a convention and I pitched this idea of, hey, I'm writing this book and I need you to do my art. Like, you have to do my art. And he had never done cover art before. I gave him, I believe, a bookmark, like with my name and number on it. And because I happen to have one in my bag, and took away, his contact info. I ended up pinging him on Instagram, and we chatted. Like, my wife drove that day, or drove us home from the convention just so that I could chat with John on my phone, and he was chatting with me between customers at his table. This was at Scares the Care in 2021, and I was most of the way through the novel at the point. I wasn't completely done, I don't think. I might have been just finished, but we went back and forth on this, and he produced the artwork, and I couldn't have been happier. And there's a huge banner. Wow. A huge banner over here. Sorry, I'm just still getting used to cameras and mics, and everything's reversed. But he produced this. I couldn't be happier with it, and that became the imagery for the novel. I sent him the description of the character of that creature from the actual excerpt from the novel. I demanded that he actually read the book before he finished the cover, and he did, and he loved it. I'll let him speak to that in his own video or comments if he wants. But point being is that dream that I had wasn't necessarily set on Erlon. All right, so one of the things authors will do, like what I did, is we can usually take a story and blend it into whatever we want to write. So in this case, I knew that there was something, it's a fantasy character, something traumatic always happens in their past, right? It's kind of generic. But I knew that there was a traumatic event that kick-started who Syl'Kara, the character in this novel, would become someday. And I repurposed this modern-day dream that I had into the world of Erlon, which is very medieval fantasy-based, and turned it into this. Well, what about what you said about the challenge, Rick, and writing blah, 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 blah? Well, I wanted to focus on and see if I was capable of writing a book from a single perspective. Because Bathe in the Blood of Ravens, which it's sitting on my side, that's why I keep pointing over there. Bathe in the Blood of Ravens was multi-point of view, lots of point of view shifts throughout the novel. It's definitely very third-person omnipotent, sometimes third-person close. But it was a lot to keep track of. It's much harder to write a novel of that size and scale. I wanted to write a shorter novel. My goal was about 40 to 50,000 words. I hit that. I hit that mark with this. Not that I was keeping a word count through the writing process. I write until the story is done, no matter how many words it takes. I think Blood of Ravens makes that clear. It's 225,000 words. And I was not trying to make it that big. It just became that big. But I wanted to see if I could keep it short and concise, if I could write it quickly, if I could write it only on weekends, and if I could keep it to a single point of view throughout the entire novel and keep it interesting. I succeeded. This is single point of view from the point of view of a little elf girl named Syl'Kara. Never changes point of view. You never see it from the enemy's perspective. You never get any other perspective from any other character. Once you fall into her mindset, you're trapped there through the entire experience she's about to go through, facing off with this thing. This, pictured on the cover, is Siscci. I can't go into who Siscci is or what Siscci is without revealing the main plot of the story. I'll start with just telling you what's on the back of the book. Born to a life of abandonment and servitude, Syl'Kara finds herself confronted by a horror she could not have imagined. As the rest of the population falls victim to the beast's horrid designs, she is left with a terrible choice. Should she attempt to flee and try to survive long enough to see her world come to an end? Or will she be able to overcome her fears and fight back before demonic forces overtake the rest of the populace and grow to full strength? So Syl'Kara starts this novel as a slave. And we're not talking like American history slave. She was just taken into paid servitude or bought from a family that sold her off for financial gain. And the guy that owns her is a traveling merchant that sells kind of illicit wares, if you will. So he only has a few places he can go, and he drags them from port town to trading town, port town to trading town. And she's been stuck with him for decades at this point. She's an elf. Elves age slower than humans. They grow to maturity slower than humans. They have a hard time focusing on reality. Their lives are extended, so they don't have the sense of urgency that humans have. So that said, she did also grow up predominantly with humans, so she has a little of that part of her in her where she is capable of focusing and acting quickly and all of that. She does not finish this book as a slave. She doesn't last long in this book as a slave. Things happen. Things change dramatically to both her and the world around her. This creature comes into the situation, and she, for reasons I won't explain, ends up being the only person that she can fathom as being capable of responding and stopping events before they go too far. She has to learn to become something she's not, something that her body and her mind and the experiences she's had have been kind of leaning towards, hinting to her that she had these capabilities. But she learns through this that she has to embrace those things to survive and do things that she didn't think were possible or that she was capable of. I have, when I originally put this novel out, I marketed it exclusively to adults. I was like, you know what, this is too dark. It's too painful in some scenes. The things that this poor woman goes through, I wouldn't put this in the hands of a child. And then a somewhat mutual friend, the wife and I we met over a freaking stupid mobile game that, you log in and play when you feel like it kind of thing. But there's a chat built in, and she mentioned in one of the chat sessions that I had books out, and then, a couple times I would log in and people would ask, hey, what's the link to your book? And, one of the guys ended up buying copies of both Blood of Ravens and Siscci. He read them both. He's in Belgium. So I was taken aback by that. I was like, well, I'm international now, I guess. And, he read it. He loved both. He posted reviews on Goodreads. He then bought copies for his children, his two daughters. One is 16, one is 14, if I remember correctly. His 14-year-old had him send me a message halfway through this book in tears because a certain non-critical character died that she fell in love with. And then sent another message through him when she finished that it was the most amazing thing she'd ever read and gave her more confidence. So I take that as a little badge of honor there. I'll accept that. That's, wasn't really who I had in mind reading the book. But that, inspired me as an author. And then I did a couple conventions where it did indeed seem that just hearing the descriptions of the books, that the younger women between the ages of about 15 to 22, 23 seemed to gravitate towards this book and just latch onto it. And I did have a couple come back second or third day of a convention and say that it was amazing and they loved it. Now, they don't all post reviews. I wish every reader would. But I've heard great things about this. And that is a female character with a largely female cast, written by a man, and women being inspired by it. So take that as you will. Hopefully that encourages some of you to give this book a chance. Because if you like this, you'll love Blood of Ravens, and you'll love the next book I have to talk about even more. That said, it is a very dark story. There's a lot of trauma in this book. She does not have a nice life or a good experience. There's not a lot of hope. There's not a lot of happiness. This is borderline grimdark, right? Except there is a slightly positive ending to the end. It does have a resolution of its own. It doesn't leave something hanging, other than hints that Syl'Kara does go on to live another life or take things a step further than you see in the novel. But that's not part of the story, so it's not included. And that's all the hints that you kind of get. It's like, it's not some vibe of, oh crap, where's the third and fourth and fifth book and blah, blah, blah. There's none of that going on. I do know that people have come back saying they need more of her as a character, which is also awesome. But this is a very dark, tragic story. Even their victory comes at a cost, and there's tragedy surrounding the way that they win. So it's very, very, very dark, very, very emotional in points. Some of the scenes that I wrote, I read back and I'm like, whoa, I probably shouldn't have included that much detail about that. But then people come back raving about it. So I would highly recommend this to anyone that likes a novel that's centered around a strong female character, even if they don't start off that way. Anybody that likes, more of a one-take shot at fantasy, because that's kind of what this is. Back to the writing process itself, this took me 4 weekends to write. I wrote it during the 4 weekends in July. That's it. Didn't write on any Monday through Tuesday. Didn't write for half of the Sundays. I was cranking out about 8,000 words a weekend, sometimes a little more. The total story is about 47,000 words. I did not use a beta reader because I considered this a one take that I was just going to put out on Kindle Unlimited. And I did that, and it did not work on Kindle Unlimited. As soon as I took it off of, you have to be exclusive to Kindle to do that. As soon as I took it off of exclusivity, sales blew up. So I won't be doing that again. And that's a note to you authors. Just because Kindle Unlimited works for some authors doesn't mean it'll work for you, no matter how much you advertise. Some books just work better when you can hold them in your hand and read them. And this one is one of those. So, quick note, final note on formatting. This is follows the same formatting as what you saw in Bathed in the Blood of Ravens Enhanced Edition, where I've got, in this case, the sketch for the painting as the chapter art. It does have the timestamps. It does have timestamps on the even number pages. And it has all of that nice formatting, same font sizes as the Enhanced Edition for Blood of Ravens. And the original release of this had the a snippet from a short story called Threads of Night as the prologue, because the events of that short story lead to the events in Siscci, although that's a different character in the short story. But for this reprinting, when I finally got it off of Amazon exclusivity, I reformatted it and added the Threads of Night short story in its entirety as the prologue. The short story here covers a character named Sorsha, who most of the characters in the world know as Nightweaver. And Nightweaver is also in Bathed in the Blood of Ravens. So Kara, under another name, is also in Bathed in the Blood of Ravens. Timeline-wise, this book is set, as can be seen in the front of the book, 575 of the First Era, whereas Blood of Ravens is 113 of the Second Era. As I mentioned in the previous video, First Era ended at around year 1175, so that makes this book almost 700 years prior to Bathed in the Blood of Ravens. So it is definitely set in the past. That doesn't mean you have to read this first. Reading this first would not necessarily net you any extra quality or experience in reading Blood of Ravens. This is definitely more of an in reference to the one character when she does show up in Bathed in the Blood of Ravens. So it's your choice which one you read first. Next time, I will be talking about Dusk, and we'll go into a deep dive on that. Thank you for watching this, and if you have enjoyed this, please make sure to pick up copies of my novels. Leave reviews when you read them, please, on Goodreads, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you feel comfortable doing so, and please be honest. That's all I ask from anybody. And if you enjoy my novels, please share them with friends. I don't care if you all buy a copy or if you all just share the same copy around. I'm not in this to get rich. I'm not in this to make money. I would like to someday make enough to support what it costs to do this. But right now, I'm really only interested in you enjoying what I produce as a way to escape this crappy reality we're all stuck in. Till next time.